and this is another exciting edition of Wardy Screencasts. This is going to go in line with the article of the week we'll be working on and really figuring out what the author is saying. So we're going to do the summary, which we've talked about. Then the next part is, what's the author saying about the topic? The final thing will be kind of our reaction to that. What do we think? We'll get into that another day. So really today, how to determine the conversation. What's that mean? What's the author talking about? Why? And then how to determine what the author actually says about that topic, what they add to the quote-unquote conversation. So let us get into this. Remember the 3 keys to communication: Pac-Man, purpose, audience, context. All right, now I will say this. Figure that out. The other thing to figure out is, what is the conversation that's going on? And as a class, we'll kind of talk about this. And I'll go back over this. But think of it this way. You walk up to 2 friends, you hear them talking about something. Maybe it's the soccer team. Maybe it's the school musical. Maybe it's Riverdale. Maybe it's another TV show. All right, point is this. You hear them talking. Then all of a sudden you hear something that they say and you jump into conversation. Does that happen? Or do you just sit there and listen? Most of us join in the conversation because we have something to say and add, correct? Correct, I would hope. That's what a writer really does. They're joining a conversation about a topic. It's just written instead of spoken. They might read something or read some study or read a current event in the news, and then they talk about it. Cable news networks do this all the time. We'll look at some examples of that. A lot of sports takes these days. It's a conversation, and somebody else has decided to enter it. That's really the basis of this. So you have to ask yourself, what's the conversation? What's the topic the author is writing about? So you kind of get it organized like this, figure out what is the conversation, what's the main topic. If the writer was sitting next to you right now, what would he or she, what would the quote-unquote they say about it? Information that shows you this is what they'd say. Kind of supports it. This is going to end up being like a race formatted response. So you're going to do in the title and author and gist. So it's like your topic sentence, almost like you're restating in one sentence. Cite some evidence, 1 to 2 sentences. Explain how that quote kind of shows what the author's saying about the conversation, 2 to 3 sentences. And that's it for part 2. So for example, I did this for the Can the Dung Beetle Help Global Warming article, of which we are probably sick and tired. We're going to use this as an example. All right, what's the conversation, the main topic? Global warming and ways to help control it naturally. That really was the gist of what that author is trying to inform us about. It's not just cars, which I'm getting to the next thing. If the writer was sitting right next to you, what would he or she say about the topic? He or she would probably say, well, many people, myself included, think about air pollution from cars, landfills when we hear global warming and temperatures rising. The writer informed the reader that nature too can impact the situation. She would also likely say that humans need to stop impacting the natural environment without understanding it first. Think about that. Dung beetles, if we see beetles and kill them, and they can't aerate the animal dung, for lack of a better word, that's going to hurt the environment. Temperature's going to rise. So that's really what she's saying. That's what she adds to the conversation. Don't just look at the landfills. Don't just look at cars. We have to look at animals and dung beetles too. And then I quoted 2 pieces of specific evidence. Ultimately, I turn that into a paragraph like this, which I will show you. And I actually have an example in Google Classroom when you go to do it that you can look up and look at this. Model yours after this. You start with the writer of the article. Now you can do that this time because in the summary you'll have already written the author's name. If you want to include the author's name specifically, again, you can. There was no author for this one, so I started with the writer. If I actually had her name, I would have put it. So anyway, the writer of the article joins the conversation about ways to control global warming and focuses on natural causes and solutions. If I go back, that's really my gist. While many people think about air pollution from cars and landfills when they hear the phrase global warming, the writer informs the reader that nature too can impact the situation. Pulled it right from here. For example, the writer focuses on the effects animal dung can have on the environment. In fact, she writes, quote, and I put my specific evidence. One issue the author points out is that dung beetle populations have decreased. For instance, she writes, in Finland, for example, more than half of the dung beetle species are threatened or endangered. And then like a concluding sentence. The writer likely wants to focus on what the natural environment can do to help global warming. So if you think about this, it really is as simple as title, author, gist in a sentence or two, quote a piece of evidence or two in a sentence or two, and explain how that quote kind of adds to the conversation in 2 to 3 sentences. Keep it simple. This should be like 4 or 5 sentences. Keep it simple. And that's They Say, and understanding the conversation. Wardy out!